Obviously, this is a NetBackup 7.6 Google Plus Hangout. We're going to be talking about virtualization advancements coming out. But because we're talking about unreleased technology, I'm obligated by our legal team to read this first. So bear with me. It says, any information regarding pre-release Symantec offerings, future updates, or other planned modifications is subject to ongoing evaluation by Symantec and therefore subject to change. This information is provided without warranty of any kind, express or implied. Customers who purchase Symantec offerings should make their purchase decision based upon features that are currently available. So now that we have that out of the way, questions. So we have a number of folks that are monitoring our social feeds. So if you have questions that you'd like our panel to answer, and I'll get into introductions in a second, please tweet your questions out to SYMC, that's SimC Hangout, SYMC Hangout, and you might even get mentioned on the broadcast here. So introductions. To my immediate left is our friend Jason Buffington, who is a data protection analyst from ESG. And next to Jason is Miko Nikuri. How's that? Is that good? Senior product manager and resident V expert. Next to Miko is Renee Carlisle, who's also senior product manager on NetBackup. And next to Renee is George Winter, our resident virtualization guru here at Symantec, technical product manager, and he's the one that's going to be running through our demos here. So, let me just mention again, SimC Hangout, hashtag SimC Hangout. If you have questions, we'll be monitoring those, and hopefully we can get them answered for you as well. But if we're ready to go, George, are you ready to go? Okay. So let me let everyone here introduce themselves again and give a one-liner of something that makes you interested in NetBackup and a one-liner on what makes you interested in virtualization specifically. Start with you, Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Buffington. I'm the senior analyst at the Enterprise Strategy Group covering data protection. I've been doing data protection for 23 years. And so anyone who's been doing backup as long as I have, i.e. NetBackup, that's interesting to me. There's your first. And for virtualization, nothing makes BC and DR easier today than virtualization, and nothing breaks more traditional backup solutions than virtualization. So it makes for a fun time.
Hi, and my name is Mikko Nikuri. I'm a regional, I'm a product manager for backup and recovery at Symantec, and what makes NetBackup interesting for me is really the customer delight aspect, that we can actually provide so much new for our backup customers that give you integrated capabilities with VMware and other leading platforms that really help you do your backups and restores in an accelerated manner for all kinds of environments. And what's really for VMware side, the interesting part for me has been that I've been following VMware since 2001, since the early days, and it's just amazing. I'm a kind of geek, so anything that's that kind of evolving and changing the world in a rapid manner is really interesting to me.
So I'm Renee Carlisle. I'm a product manager for the NetBackup product team, and I think what I love about NetBackup is I ran it as a customer for so long that I fell in love with it and had to come work for the company. So I'm really dedicated to the NetBackup product line. And for VMware, I just think some of our coolest technology, the coolest features that we have come out, seem to be around the VMware stuff. So it gets me really excited to see all the cool things that we're doing with VMware.
Okay, I'm George Winter, Technical Product Manager for NetBackup, and I've been working on the virtualization stuff since NetBackup officially supported this in the early 2000s. So essentially, my focus has been on virtualization and in various areas of that. Kind of a pet topic of mine associated with virtualization is performance. I always enjoy performance and performance-related topics. I've been involved in, with other colleagues at Symantec, been involved in three VMware benchmarks. Early on, we did a VCB, VMware Consolidated Backup benchmark. We did that in the very early days of VCB implementation. Since our vStorage API support, I've actually run two separate benchmarks. One was basically a SAN-based benchmark, and one was a network-based benchmark, or NBD. So been interested in what's the best way of backing up virtual machines the fastest possible way and most efficient, in the sense that make sure you don't lose anything on the restore side. So usually you do backups and you create these backup environments, and they're great for backups, but they kind of cost you on the restore side. And I kind of like to emphasize getting the best of both worlds. So that's kind of my focus on the virtualization side.
So while we're obviously, this is something new for our NetBackup team here. In doing it, this is not just a Google Hangout. This is a Google panel Hangout. So it's a little bit different. We're experiencing a couple of difficulties here, but we'll get going in a few minutes. Let me just ask you a question, George. Yesterday you were on the Vision keynote stage, and Sean had talked to you about how last year we announced Better Backup for All, and particularly NetBackup Accelerator, delivering 100 times faster backup. Yesterday, your demo consisted of something else that we're actually going to be walking through here, but we called it, or he announced it as 800 times faster recovery. So tell us more about that and what that's actually going to mean for customers.
Yeah, so the recovery part of that is part of the feature called Instant Recovery for VMware. You might see the IRV logo for that. So it's instant recovery for VMware. What we're doing is we're actually powering on a virtual machine. We back up the virtual machine. We'd write that data to disk. Now that disk can be a standard disk. It can be a standard NetBackup disk target, but it also can be deduplication target. A lot of people will actually be using it with that deduplication. So there's many times when you boot these systems off a deduplication, do this power on from a deduplication target, the power on process can be quite slow, because you have to reformulate all the blocks within that deduplication target. The problem with that is that a lot of vendors actually don't plan for that when they create their deduplication target. So when they're doing something like this sort of, in this sort of case where you're powering on the virtual machine directly from that deduplication target, when you do that, the result is a virtual machine that performs poorly. So it's a slowly booting virtual machine, and it's a virtual machine that anything that's going on within the virtual machine, typically a very important application, those applications respond very slowly. So the problem is that you've booted this virtual machine, and it is available, but it's not very responsive. And what we've done is we've gone to great pains to do as best as we could to make sure that the performance of that virtual machine is very, very good. So the virtual machine, even though we're booting off a deduplication technology, the virtual machine itself boots quickly, and the virtual machine itself is available and is responsive to users. So that's a very important aspect of that, something we work very hard.
George, will the size of the virtual machine affect the time it takes to boot that machine up?
Well, I'm fond of saying that size doesn't matter. Nothing personal with me, but size really does not matter. So actually, all joking aside, actually the size of the virtual machine does not matter. The virtual machine can actually be small or large, and that doesn't really impact how long it takes to boot that virtual machine. Because with this technology, actually much of the data still exists on the backup storage, so that we're not moving data around while we're in this boot process. So the size does not matter. What we found is a small virtual machine and a larger virtual machine can boot at about the same time.
And George, how's the integration into the vSphere infrastructure? I mean, once you have that VM up and running, what's the process? Is there any downtime on moving that into a production data store, or how do you do that then?
Well, that's a good question. So the virtual machine is powered on from the backup storage. It's powered on from the backup target. Now, the problem with that is that you don't want 250 virtual machines that are booted from your backup target. I mean, your backup target is a backup target, and it's going to be used for backups, and it's going to be used for other restores as well. So there's only so much I/O capacity that you have within that backup target. So the idea is that we've made the virtual machine accessible first and then we do the restore process. So the way I kind of like to term this is that when we're doing instant recovery for VMware, we're turning restores on their ear. So essentially what we're doing is with a standard restore, you first restore the virtual machine, and then after you've restored that virtual machine, then you boot it up. So the problem with that is that these larger virtual machines, it can take you hours, half a day to restore that virtual machine. During that entire time where you have a critical application that's not available, you have users complaining, you have people that can't log into their system. So what happens is that they have to wait for hours for that virtual machine to be accessible before it can be booted. So with the instant recovery for VMware, what if we can turn that around? What if we can boot that virtual machine first and then restore it? So this gets to your point about the vCenter integration, is that once we boot that virtual machine, make it accessible, allow users to log in, get their email, run their database, whatever happens to be going on with that virtual machine. Now they have access to it, and they really don't care whether it's running on backup storage or whether it's running on the traditional data store. So what happens is that when we're doing this process, we boot the virtual machine, and then at that point, once the virtual machine is booted, users have logged into the virtual machine. What we're able to do from that point forward is now make that virtual machine, move that virtual machine over to the traditional ESXi data store. When we move the virtual machine over to that data store, we just use built-in capabilities that are designed by VMware. So we use VMware technologies for that. So essentially what you do is you use storage vMotion. The storage vMotion process allows you to be able to move that virtual machine over to the traditional data store, get it off that backup storage, move it over to the traditional data store, and then the virtual machine is running on storage that it was designed to run on. So it's now back up and running, and during this process, while the storage vMotion process occurs, you can still be doing other backups with that backup target. It doesn't limit you from doing that, and the virtual machine's 100% accessible. So I mean, it's a very seamless process. So essentially, basically the downtime can be just a few seconds. I mean, we've booted the virtual machine in the lab. We booted virtual machines in less than 30 seconds. So a full-blown Windows virtual machine, 30 seconds, it's available. Accessible on the network, you can gain access to it. And for this Exchange server, in our environment, the Exchange server is a little more complex because when you boot Exchange, lots of Exchange processes, it's essentially an application, a database. Lots of these database processes spring up. So that takes a little bit longer, but it's just the nature of Exchange. It would take longer to boot anyway. But when we boot that up using instant recovery, it's very, very quick.
So I like the idea of what you were talking about there, the idea of actually being able to spin the VM up from the secondary storage. I have to admit, when I first heard about it, though, the first concern I had around that idea was if you have a mission-critical application running in a VM and you're used to a certain kind of performance characteristics, and all of a sudden now you're bringing it up on a different host, which likely has less free CPU, it has less free memory, and oh, by the way, its storage is likely more optimized for heavy write load because it's normally the storage being used for backups, which is a pure write scenario more than anything else. So originally I was a little uncomfortable with the idea. But then as I started thinking about it, comparing that with the idea of just completely being down until I bring that VM back across to a production host seemed more compelling. And I guess the analogy that finally made me settle on it was the idea that if you're going down the highway, if you have a flat tire, the idea of actually being able to put on that baby donut tire while you're still traveling 55 miles an hour, slowing down, saying, okay, now I'm on the baby donut for a little bit. I haven't slowed down that much. And oh, by the way, transparently, it's going to go from the baby donut right back to a full-size tire again as vMotion moves it back on that production storage. That was a really interesting scenario to me. I do think, though, it's important to understand that this scenario is really best suited for when you're talking about one or two servers going down at a time. This is a server-level recovery type scenario. And if you're thinking about a site-wide scenario like true disaster recovery or business continuity, one of the things that people should be thinking about as part of this is that if you have a site-level crisis, you don't typically see the entire infrastructure go back up or it's going to come back online again in one stroke. You need to be planning for what are those mission-critical systems. Those are the the ones have to come up first. Those are the ones best suited to come up on the secondary storage and then roll back in. And then as your tiers of importance for those VMs go through, the tier 1 stuff comes up first and the tier 2. So proper BCDR planning to make sure which ones come up first within that baby donut scenario and then roll back. I think that should be part of what people think about when they're thinking about more than just a few servers at a time.
No, and that's a great point. And when I said this is not a replacement for powering on hundreds of virtual machines, you're not going to do that. I mean, this is not. It will never do that because the backup storage was just never designed
you could
to be able to support that. You could try, and we have tried actually, but you can't. It was never designed to do that. But the thing about it is, we're not replacing standard replication technologies where you have tier 1 applications that have to be up within 10 seconds. I mean, it's nothing like that. However, in a pinch, when you encounter something where you need that virtual machine and you need it quickly, and maybe you didn't really plan that virtual machine would be that important, and maybe it's just some once in a while event that sure. requires that. That's where that it comes in really handy, and so that's one of the things. So what I like to do is, I think we have the screen. Can we see that screen now? So what I'd like to do is, this is a bit of a presentation. We'll just go through exactly what we're going to be showing here. This is the Handycam version. So it's the monkey cam, and I guess I'm the monkey. So this is what I wanted to do is just kind of cover what we're going to be going over for the next hour. So these are the features that we will be showing you demos of these features. So we'll do the NetBackup Accelerator. We've been talking quite a bit about that. A great technology, instant recovery for VMware as well. These two technologies actually go hand in hand, and this will be part of a single demo. The Accelerator feature is a feature near and dear to my heart in the sense that Accelerator allows us to be able to back up the virtual machine on an incremental basis forever. So essentially, this is not like your standard client-based incremental backups where you're backing up at the file level. These are incremental backups that are backing up at the VMDK level. So we're using the VMware's changed block tracking to understand what blocks have changed since the previous backup. But what we do is we're able to recombine those virtual machines and perform what is effectively a full backup every time. Now you say, well, if you're doing a full backup every time, that requires tremendous amount of disk space on the back end. That's not true at all. It actually requires 0 additional disk space, because when we do these backups, we're writing this to a deduplication target, and the deduplication target takes into account that many of these blocks are the same blocks that existed before from a previous backup. So essentially what this means is that the deduplication target really isn't impacted. So it's a great technology, and what we found is that with this technology, it can improve your backup performance. We're talking about 100 times faster backups, and this will really do it. I mean, it can really improve things. And one thing about faster backups is, if you've attended my sessions here at Vision, one thing about faster backups is they improve everything. Faster backups mean more reliable backups. Faster backups mean less hardware for backups. And faster backups mean that you have a shorter backup window. So lots of benefits of that. Another new feature that is in 7.6 is Replication Director for VMware. Now, Replication Director has been out since 7.5, but what we're doing is we're extending this to VMware. So the Replication Director feature is a feature that allows us to be able to integrate with arrays. So we have our virtual machines that exist on arrays, and we want to be able to use the embedded virtual machine snapshot technologies that are designed within each one of these each one of these arrays. Use those technologies and use those to protect VMware. So all these arrays have different technologies that are built into them. For example, with our support, we have NetApp support. The NetApp support involves things like SnapVault and SnapMirror, and those technologies are technologies that NetApp has worked really, really hard to perfect and to create great technologies, and now we're extending that to VMware. So we're using the NetApp to help us be able to create snapshots of these virtual machines, and we're using our own embedded technology, like our single file restore, our vRay technology, if you will. We're using that vRay technology to be able to understand the data that exists inside the virtual machine. So, and that's really kind of the key, because a lot of of vendors, they don't really understand what's inside the virtual machine, so they have to mount it afterwards. They have to do processes where they mine the information in those virtual machines, or they do it like a post-process indexing. We don't have to do any of that. We understand the data that exists inside those virtual machines. It's a very, very powerful technology. Another new technology is what we call intelligent policy, NetBackup for VMware Intelligent Policy. So this policy allows us to be able to do two things: back up virtual machines on the fly, in the sense that we back up virtual machines as they come online. So it's really easy to create these virtual machines, and we can automatically protect them. So if a new virtual machine comes online, we automatically protect that virtual machine and make sure that new virtual machine is backed up. So we'll automatically sense that it exists and be sure to include it in backup processing. And the other part of intelligent policy is resource limits. So we can automatically load balance across the entire VMware environment. Make sure that no single backup or no backup processes severely impact a single ESXi host. So what we want to do is we want to be able to monitor and keep track of all the backups that are occurring and spread those backups across the entire VMware environment. This, in association with things like technologies like VMware Accelerator, very powerful. I mean, these are very powerful technologies. I highly recommend that you implement within your environment to make VMware backups more efficient. And then another technology with 7.6 is vCloud Director support. So the VMware's vCloud Director is a popular technology that's been around for some time, and we're introducing direct vCloud Director support in the 7.6 release. That is, we're really excited about that. And then also finally, we're going to show today a vSphere plugin. So the vSphere plugin itself is a plugin that allows us to be able to report to the virtual machine administrator exactly what backups are occurring. So the virtual machine administrator can look in the GUI that he or she loves. I mean, they can look at that vSphere client, and they're looking at that all day long. And they can just simply look at that interface and understand better exactly what backups are occurring. Okay, so let's take a look at the first demonstration that we're going to show here. We're going to be showing NetBackup for VMware Accelerator, Instant Recovery for VMware, and the Auto Image Replication technology. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in, get out of here. While we do that, any questions from the peanut gallery?
We do have a comment that came through that said your screen is a little dark. So if you turn up the brightness, and then they're anxious to see the demo.
Okay, so hopefully that's a little bit better. The brightness is about up as high as I can get it. Okay, so what we're doing here is I'm going to show you. Let's look at the resolution. See if I can turn this up a little bit. That's about it. Okay, so what we're showing here is we're logged into our master server. We actually have two NetBackup domains here. This first domain is configured for the VMware NetBackup for VMware Accelerator. So we've had these policies, and this is what we're going to be doing with this. Let me just run through this with the PowerPoint here very quickly. So essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to use the accelerator to do a backup, and this is the accelerator process. If you can see this on the screen, the accelerator process is a simple process. The nice thing about accelerator, you don't have to modify anything on the VMware environment, and you don't have to modify anything in the NetBackup environment. This is enabled with a simple checkbox, so it's very easy to get running. So let me show you here. So this is a process. We simply do a backup, and NetBackup, by configuring Accelerator, automatically understands that this is an incremental forever, and only the first backup is a true full backup, and then from that point on, you're running full backups or incremental backups, but you can run both, and then run those backups from that point on as incrementals. So this is a quote from a NetBackup beta customer. Now I can restore whole VM from a full backup, individual files and databases. It works perfect. Yeah, so we're going to show you how perfect this works. It's a great stuff. The other thing about this is that when you run this, what we're going to be doing is when you run this, all you have to do to enable this is simply check a single checkbox. Now, in this case, we're going to do a little bit more complicated backup. So essentially what we're going to do is we have our primary net backup domain. You see the appliance on the left there, that 5230, and then on the right, you see our secondary domain. The secondary domain is where we're going to use the automatic image replication technology. So essentially we do an accelerator backup, style backup, then the automatic image replication automatically sends the metadata. So it sends the backup image and the metadata to the secondary domain. So it's very quick in the sense that when we send the image, we're also sending the catalog information. Keep in mind that if you do not have the catalog information, you cannot restore. You may have the image over there, but if you don't have the catalog data or the metadata that's associated with that image, you cannot restore from that second location. So that's kind of a bad thing about that, and that's what AIR solves. So with AIR, you don't have to worry about that because automatic image replication automatically sends the backup image and the catalog information. That's really kind of the critical thing. Then the third step we're going to do is we're going to power on that VM. So we're going to take that VM and power it on instantly. So let me get this set up, and I'll walk you through this process as it's running. Okay, so again, this is our primary domain. This is the policy. Now, one thing I want to show you here is right here in the middle. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm circling my mouse around it. Right there in the middle, see that Use Accelerator checkbox? All you have to do is select the Use Accelerator checkbox. That's all that's required to enable this technology. So, again, no modifications to the VMware environment, no modifications to your backup environment. You simply need to select Accelerator. That's what turns this on. Another thing I want to point out is the appliance_AIR policy storage here on the left. Circling right up here, you can see that appliance AIR. That is a policy storage that we've defined for this. And let me just show you that in our storage lifecycle policies. And I'll show you how we've set this up. So this is what we're doing is this is what defines exactly how the backup is occurring. So here we have two steps here. We stair-step through these processes. So we just go do step one, then we do step two, do step three. And these are defined by the backup administrator. Step one is a traditional backup. Nothing special about that. We just define a backup, then we are writing that to our NetBackup appliance. Step two is the replication process. This is where we are replicating the data over to the secondary system. Now, we know the secondary system that we're running, what that is, because we define that in our storage, and our storage is AIR. So in this case, we've defined AIR, and AIR says we're sending it over to the secondary domain, and that's what's going on there. So that's that process. Wanted to show you that very, very quickly. Getting back to our policy, just a couple of other things I want to talk about here within the policy itself. A lot of different options that we can do. When we define the policy, we can do things like enable file level recovery. This is over here. That's another checkbox. What that does is that allows you to be able to do single file restore from that virtual machine. Now, it could be an Exchange server, but you can still, this allows you to be able to do single file restores of the other data, not the Exchange data, but the other data that exists within that virtual machine. We can also do things like exclude blocks and exclude swap and paging files. So those are where the exclude block optimization is excluding empty blocks, and the exclude paging and swap files, we automatically detect those swap files and we can remove those from the backup processing. The other thing is that we remove NetBackup is that this is a snapshot processing. This allows us to be able to remove the NetBackup snapshot if we detect one. So if you have a stuck snapshot, you simply select this within the policy configuration, and once you do that, that automatically detects that stuck NetBackup snapshot, removes it, and proceeds with the backup. One final thing I want to show you over here is over on the right. What we're doing is we're backing up an Exchange system. So we're backing up an Exchange VM. And what we're doing here is to enable Exchange backups, all we have to do is simply check these checkboxes. The first one is enable Exchange recovery, and the second one is truncate logs. So that's optional. Truncating logs is optional, obviously. But what this does is that is how we enable Exchange backups. This is a very, very simple implementation. Very proud of that. So we actually ran that backup, and I'm going to show you the results of that. So this is kind of like, you know, the cooking show where they put the cake in the oven, pull it out 2 seconds later, it's all cooked. So that's what's going on here. So we ran the policy here. This is the application state capture of the Exchange server itself. And this job is the replication. So this is where we replicated that virtual machine over. So if you look at the backup job here, one thing I want to point out is that if you look at the backup job, you actually see that the performance of this backup job is significant. The performance of this backup job was essentially 1 gigabyte per second, not 1 megabyte, 1 gigabyte per second, 965 megabytes per second. So that is the effective rate. That is the effect of Accelerator, NetBackup Accelerator for VMware, is where we're able to back up the virtual machine so fast. This is a terabyte virtual machine that the effective rate is essentially 1 gigabyte per second. Now our network doesn't even come close to supporting that. Best case, doesn't even come close to supporting that kind of backup. So, but this is the effective rate that we were able to achieve. Once the backup is finished, then we're able to replicate that job. So we're able to replicate that job over to the secondary domain. And that's what this job is. That just takes a few seconds. That's very quick to perform. So that's on the primary domain. Now let's get out of that and let's go over to the secondary domain. So this is a secondary domain, and we see this job here. This is the import of the virtual machine. So this is where the virtual machine data, the catalog image and the backup image. This is where the data associated with that virtual machine backup was imported. This only takes seconds because the auto image replication technology only sends the blocks that have changed since the previous backup. So it's an extremely efficient way of backing up and sending that data over very slow network links. So we imported that data. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do the fun stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that virtual machine booted. I'm going to start a timer here. We're going to see how fast we can time this guy. I'm going to start a timer, and I'm going to get that virtual machine booted. So we got that going.
Hey, George.
Yeah.
George, while that's running, let me just remind the audience, for those of you that are viewing online, that you can still text in or tweet in your questions at hashtag SYMC Hangout. Just want to throw that out there, just a reminder to everyone that is actually watching. If you have a question, by all means, tweet it out, and we'll mention you on the broadcast here.
Okay, so now what we're seeing here is we're seeing the virtual machine booting. Now again, the virtual machine data is on backup data. The virtual machine data was aired over auto image replication over to the secondary domain, and we are booting from the secondary domain. We can see here the Microsoft Corporation logo, and we can see that it's booting up here. It's been 51 seconds, and we're still in the process of booting. Again, the virtual machine is being booted from backup storage. It is not on the traditional ESXi data store. It's on backup storage. So this virtual machine, for all intents and purposes, is 100% accessible to every user once it gets booted. And once the virtual machine is online, we can easily storage vMotion it over to the traditional backup data store, ESXi data store. One other thing about this is that when the data is moved over, any changes that occur to that virtual machine during this process are 100% retained. So any changes that occurred to the virtual machine are always retained as part of this process. So we see our Control-Alt-Delete. The virtual machine is accessible. We did that in like 1 minute and 32 seconds. So our 1 terabyte Exchange server, it took us minutes to back up the 1 terabyte Exchange server. It took us just minutes to replicate 1 terabyte of virtual machine data over to the secondary domain. And then it took us just 93 seconds to boot this virtual machine. So it's a very quick and very efficient process. So that is it for that. We're going to move on to another demo. that was kind of the fun one. They're all kind of
Hey,
fun.
let's while you're setting that up, let's give the mic over to either Jason or Miko or Renee and see if there's any real world applications that you've seen for what George just talked about with instant recovery and how that can apply in their environments, how it can help them out, maybe certain struggles that you know that they've gone through, maybe from the vExpert point of view as well, how this could benefit those in the those of our customers who are operating within virtualized environments.
Sure. I mean, I can start here. So again, the fact that we can actually have the recovery time objective to be much faster in a way that we don't need to do the data movement before we can actually stand up the VM. It helps immensely everybody, and in the way that we can actually get those VMs to be operating as they would normally operate while we're doing the storage vMotion over to a production data store. If you want to do that, it just saves time and makes everything more flexible for the users. So everybody loves that idea.
So I think the thing that's most interesting for me is that, I mentioned during the introductions that virtualization solves some server recovery scenarios in ways that we could never do with physical machines. And certainly one of them is the struggle that many people have with reconstituting an entire machine, where typically in the past you might have tried to do bare metal recovery type functionality, and by encapsulating machines in a virtual container, it makes them so much more portable, right? And one of the key scenarios where that gets really exciting is around enabling business continuity and disaster recovery scenarios, particularly in mid-market environments. Because in large enterprise, at least if you had enough money and you could do the justification for it, you could put whole, physical servers to physical servers. But for mid-market accounts, they could never do that. And virtualization really opens up disaster recovery type scenarios for mid-market size organizations that couldn't do that before. And the only piece that was really missing from that was an effective way to actually handle the replication and then the restart up without having to duplicate all that storage. And I think the second thing that kind of goes along with that is that typically a lot of solutions, even 5 years ago, would have used a third-party replication tool just to get the data over, and then they'd have to worry about integration with vCenter or the hypervisor and say, okay, how do I import the metadata? How do I reinstantiate those VMs, et cetera? And so some of the work that we've seen today and some of the other sessions that we've done this week really kind of smack to the idea that, okay, let's integrate replication, disaster recovery, backup, put all of that within a single UI and a single experience that actually enables those kind of scenarios for mid-market accounts that could not have done it before.
Yeah, and I think one of the keys is they actually need to be using the right tools, right? I was at a customer a few weeks ago, and they were really struggling because they were still doing legacy forms of backups for their virtual machines with a client inside, and they were commenting on it was taking them up to 24 hours to get a virtual machine back up and running by the time they re-provisioned it, created from a template, put all the OS back, put all the application stuff back, and it was a real struggle with getting multiple teams involved and trying to get this back. And I said, you know, we can get that virtual machine back for you now in a couple of minutes. And he was just floored.
Let me pile on for that for a second. So, give me more.
Sure, go ahead.
So, from an RTO perspective, when you think about how fast it takes to recover, I'm doing a blog series this month specifically around regulatory compliance and operational readiness and mapping some of the requirements like HIPAA and SOX and SEC and DoD back to something which is more pragmatic. And one of the things I think a lot of folks don't realize, particularly in mid-market organizations, is that some of those same RTO and availability requirements that you presume only apply to the largest of large organizations are very much equally applicable to upper mid-market size accounts, even if they don't have the IT acumen to do it, even if they don't have the budget of infrastructure that large enterprises do, they still have the same requirements for uptime, for availability. And in fact, I would argue if you check out technicaloptimist.com, which is my blog, I did a post about a year ago actually talking about how mid-market size organizations actually need availability more than large enterprises, because a lot of those mid-market organizations don't have the IT staff that can put on the superhero's cape and go solve this on their own. So they start hemorrhaging cash and productivity right away, and then they have to call a partner to go help them fix it. right? So the idea of actually being able to have a near zero, not zero, but a near zero RTO in order to bring that stuff back up again, say, okay, look, I don't know what went wrong, but I can hit the panic button, I can get back up and going again, and then I'll pay for the superhero to come and actually put everything back again. That's a huge enabler for especially for commodity and service type organizations of all sizes that otherwise just don't have a way to make that happen.
And just to emphasize also that besides compliance, we also of course need to have the dimension of compatibility in the way that this all works through the native APIs and native interfaces on VMware side, so it doesn't break anything. So that's of course the good thing as well, that you can use all the advanced functionality in VMware side and still do these operations on NetBackup side because of the native API integration.
Let me just stop us there. I want to we have 15 minutes left. George, just let me mention again, hashtag SimC Hangout if you have a question that you want answered. But we did throw out in a couple of preparatory tweets advertising this Hangout that we would do 300 VMs in 3 minutes. So can we do that? I'm assuming if we have 3 minutes, right? We got 15 minutes left. We can still walk folks through that.
Let's give it a try. Let me just.
All right, let me turn it back over to you then, George, and take us through that.
Okay, so let me just quickly go through what we're going to be doing here. This is Replication Director for VMware, great new feature that is being introduced in the 7.6 release. This is essentially what we're doing is using the array technologies that are built into, in this case, NetApp. We're using these array technologies and our VMware integration, combining those two to support VMware environments using the built-in storage snapshot capabilities that are designed into these arrays. We're using NetApp today. This is a typical use case where we have a primary array. We're backing up the virtual machines. We automatically detect those virtual machines, create snapshots, back up those virtual machines, index them, catalog the information. We can replicate that data to a secondary array, and then write that data to a third location. Now, one of the key points about this is that we have 3 copies of that data, and NetBackup can have completely independent, autonomous retention periods for each one of those copies, and we can restore from any one of those copies, whether the data happens to be on a storage array snapshot or happens to be on a more traditional backup target like disk tape or a dedupe target. What we're going to do for Replication Director today is we're going to show you 300 VMs in very quick time, about 3 minutes. We recommend that this process that we're showing you is about 1 second per VM, where hopefully we can exceed that. And so let me just get over to my demo system here very quickly. Okay, so what we have here is this is a policy that we've created. A couple of things about this policy is that with this policy, we've defined the virtual machines using the VMware Intelligent Policy. This is where we can automatically select those virtual machines. So what we're doing here is we're selecting the virtual machines based on one of 2 criteria. We actually have 2 ESXi hosts, 2 NetApp storage units, 2 NetApp NFS data stores. So what we're doing here is we're saying we want to back up every virtual machine on these 2 data stores, and that's what we're doing. So if somebody adds a new virtual machine or moves a virtual machine between data stores, however that works, any virtual machines on those data stores will automatically be protected. If somebody adds a new virtual machine, that is automatically included in the backup processing. So that's what's going on there. That's the intelligent policy. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kick off this backup. In the interest of time, get this going. We'll go to our activity monitor, and we'll see that the backup job is going to begin here in a minute. So essentially what is happening now is we're contacting the NetApp array. We're saying, okay, we need to create a snapshot of these virtual machines. Once the snapshot is, once we enumerate these virtual machines, we create the snapshot, and then they are saved forever, and we can restore directly from that snapshot. Now, one of the key things about this is that when we do a backup of these virtual machines, we can actually do single file restores. Everybody can do restores of the entire virtual machine, but we're actually going to do a single file restore. So this is a process. So what you see here is if you look closely, these lines are moving. You'll see that the line of these virtual machines is being moved. Every time that line moves, that virtual machine is effectively being protected. So what is happening? It's chunking along about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about that rate. And that means at that rate, these virtual machines are being protected. So it's an extremely quick process that can occur with this. Again, this is, we're doing this in a lab environment, and this is an environment that is, pristine. So this is definitely a your mileage may vary sort of thing. But one thing about this is this gives you an idea of what the technology is capable of. In your environment, it might be a bit slower, but this just gives you an idea of what you can do with the Replication Director technology. So any questions there, Alex, that I can answer? This will just take a few minutes.
If you can answer this, actually, this is something I'd like to know too, but there is a question. It says, when is 7.6 available? So when is this functionality coming out?
Very
that's something
soon.
You can answer?
Yeah, very soon.
After Vision.
After Vision.
Okay.
Yeah, soon. But I can't give you.
Although it is in beta right now, so if people want to go out and start using this technology and trying it, they can absolutely sign up for the beta program, download the code now, and start playing with all these features in their lab.
Good point. That's a very good point. So you can just go to, is it Symantec.com/symbeta? Is that it?
I believe that is the link,
Yeah,
or contact your local sales rep, either way.
Yeah. Definitely get that. You can get a copy of this. Actually, I've been running beta 2 version, which we're currently in, and it's actually very stable, running very nicely. So, and all these features that I'm showing here today, every one of them is in that beta 2 version. Okay, so we're going here. We're about 2.5 minutes, and we're still cranking away. Again, we're doing 300 VMs. So hopefully before 4 minutes ends up, we'll finish this, or else I have a little bit of pie on my face. But right now, a little pie would taste good. Lemon meringue, please. So, any comments there, Miko?
Hey, George, I mean, not directly related, but I know that 7.6 is coming up as well with new functionality for vCloud Director, for example. Can you just go through, like, while we're waiting for this to happen, on what the steps are for protecting the new objects, the vCloud vApps in vCloud Director? Is that any different from regular?
Yeah,
VM
so
protection?
vCloud Director, we're just in the interest of time, we're not going to go through that and show you that, but full vCloud Director support is in 7.6, so we will be having that. By the way, this finished, and we did finish this, and we protected 300 virtual machines in 3 minutes and 4 seconds. So it's a very, very fast technology. This is very exciting. Again, another performance-related technology that I think you'll find very interesting with the 7.6 release. vCloud Director support is direct support in 7.6. That is direct support with the API, with the vCloud Director backup API that they've included, and that is what we're providing in 7.6. This is not a kludge type of support. This is direct support, completely supported by VMware.
So did you say that's completed?
Yeah, 3 minutes, 4 seconds.
3 minutes, 4 seconds. So I know some other claims are out there in the public about backing up numbers of virtual machines in minutes.
Yeah.
So how is what you've done here different than some of the other things that we hear about?
Well, there are some other benchmarks, but one of the things about this is that there's another benchmark that claims like in the neighborhood of 500 VMs. What's different about this one is...
Well, is that 500 VMs in 3 minutes, or is that...
No, they're 15 minutes, but the difference is that what they're doing, 17 minutes, what they're doing is they're quiescing the virtual machine, and this quiesces off. We can turn on quiesce. When we do it in about 15 minutes, but with this environment, we only have 2 ESXi hosts and 2 data stores. In their environment, they had 6 ESXi hosts and 10 data stores. They had massive amounts of hardware, and if you throw hardware at anything, you're going to get better performance. So they had massive amounts of hardware with that compared to what we have here. So this is far more efficient, we feel, that is going on. In the interest of time, can I just get to the vSphere plugin very quickly? Okay, so one of the last things I wanted to show is the vSphere plugin. This is empowering the virtual machine administrator to be able to get information about the virtual machine. So what we do is the vSphere plugin, if you look over here, you can see this tab on the upper right here, And what that tab is, that's a Symantec Net Backup tab. And what that does is that actually shows information about the virtual machine of interest. So in this case, the virtual machine that we're showing is that Exchange server that we just backed up. And we show the backup history of that virtual machine. We can also get events associated with that virtual machine. And so that's the events summary that is included with Symantec. If you look at the annotations field of that virtual machine, we can also enter the last backup time of that virtual machine. This doesn't even require the plugin. So this can kind of give the virtual machine administrator a warm and fuzzy regarding that virtual machine and the ability to be able to restore that. So another thing about this is that not only do we report about the virtual machine environment, but we can also restore. So here's a Symantec Net Backup Recovery Wizard. I just right-clicked on that virtual machine. Hey, that one's dead. It's corrupt. I need to get a new one from backup. And the virtual machine administrator can simply right-click on that virtual machine, and we can do the entire restore process using our Restore Wizard, and we can restore that virtual machine. So that's the vSphere plugin in a nutshell. Much more information about that if you're interested. And this is, by the way, this vSphere plugin is included in that beta that Renee mentioned.
Cool. I think that brings us to the end of this hangout, as much as I think that we can cover in the given time. To our audience, I think we should just say that this is something that is new for us. As unfortunately, there's always some technical difficulties that can disrupt some things. So we will definitely plan this again in the future, and hopefully you'll be online and participate with us. We'd love to have you ask some more questions. We'd love to have George and Renee and Miko back, and Jason if we can get him as well. But just let me cover a couple of things before we sign off. Number one is, overall, we'd like you to comment on our Google Plus page whether you thought this sort of format of talking about our technology works. So obviously it had some technical difficulties, so it didn't necessarily work per se as we would have liked to, but in the future, would you like to participate in these types of things again? So look out for a link for a survey. There'll be 5 questions on there, and we'd love to hear from you on the format of this. The other thing is you'll be able to see the recordings later on from our Google Plus page, as well as from our Symantec YouTube account as well. And lastly, if you have any follow-up questions, like Renee mentioned earlier, if you want to get on the beta, feel free to reach out to myself. You can either follow me on Twitter, it's @asakaguchi, or Miko, I'm sure you could probably help out as well. What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is @backupmiko.
I'm at SYMRENRPM, SymRenRPM.
Mine's simple compared to those. VMX George, @VMX George.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you folks later.